Get cozy and maybe turn on a light because I'm going to read you guys a scary story. Before I begin my story, I would like you to know that everything that happened to my family was heightened due to the fact that my childhood home is located in a graveyard. One of my family's biggest beliefs when it comes to ever playing with the spirit board is that you never play it on land where the death has taken place. While we don't know the entire background of our land, my father passed tragically in our home, hence the graveyard. When my little sister was a freshman in high school, she had a sleepover at our house with two of her best friends. At some point in the night, she found my Ouija board that she knew was not to be played with and took it down into our basement, and they played with it. Something came through that board that terrified them, and they came sprinting up the stairs. At this point, neither my mom nor I had any idea that she had found the board in the first place. At first, we had no inclination that there was anything out of the ordinary of what we experienced on the daily. We always heard things and saw shadow people wandering around the house and our land. However, things started to amp up, and about 3 weeks later, I was the first one to notice this. In the hallway that leads to mine and my siblings' bedrooms, bathrooms, and basement door, a small shadow figure started peering out of my siblings' bedroom. Whenever I would make eye contact with it, it would disappear almost instantly. And that's all that would happen for the first few weeks of the new entity. Then it would stay in the doorway until I would get up, and it would disappear seemingly down to the basement. After a few weeks of that, I finally brought up the new spirit to my mom, and she confirmed that she had been seeing it too. I asked my sister if she had seen it as well, and she denied ever seeing it. After weeks of the spirit playing a weird version of hide and seek with myself and my mom, it was gone. Everything seemed to have gone back to normal, and we all had forgotten about it and moved on with our lives. Well, one night I was getting ready for bed and had just finished brushing my teeth when I opened my bathroom door to head to mine and my sister's bedroom. As soon as I stepped out into that hallway, there was the entity that had disappeared. It jumped on me, knocking me to the floor, and then gone. I ran to my mom's room and told her what had just happened, and she had no idea what to do except to put protections on ourselves and our home. About 3 days later, my sister starts to get sick, which can be dangerous because she has a metabolic disorder. Nothing we did seemed to help. One night I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom. As I'm the oldest sister of 4, I would always check on my little sisters if I ever got up to make sure they were asleep and okay. My sister and I had bunk beds in our room, and she slept on the top. I would stand on my mattress to get a good look at her before leaving the room to do whatever I needed to do. This night was no different. I threw my glasses on and stood up on my mattress to check on her. As soon as my eyes landed on her, I saw the entity sticking to my sister's chest, staring at her. I dropped off my mattress, still looking at it, and yelled at it to get off of her. It slowly turned its head to stare at me, and that's when I realized it wasn't a normal spirit. It had bright yellow eyes and sharp yellow teeth. Its whole body was gray, and I yelled for it to get off of my sister again, and this time it smiled. That's when I turned the lights on and it was gone. I screamed for my mom and violently shook my sister awake. I told them both what I had just seen, and the next morning we called a very dear friend of our family to come bless our home. When we asked my sister why that thing would be attached to her, she finally admitted that her and her friends had played with the spirit board, and then they ran back upstairs and didn't close the portal. They also thought they could cleanse the board with regular water, so that goes to show how bright they were at the time. I never saw it on my sister again, and as we continued to do spell work and sage the house and my sister, it slowly stopped showing up in our home. It's been almost 10 years since that last time I saw that thing, and I still have no damn clue what it was. Yeah, that is a really good rule of thumb with a spirit board that I never really considered. If you know that someone has passed in that space, it's really not a good idea to play one. Unfortunately, you don't know that every time. But yeah, if you know that, I definitely would avoid it. I never really thought about that. To bring in this spooky season on this October Eve, I could not think of a better story to tell you than one that takes place while a family was vacationing in a state park. Now, the specific cabin that they were staying in this state park is on indigenous land. Their father's indigenous, so they're pretty in tune with everything, and it was really apparent by the time that they got to that cabin that this was not going to be a normal vacation. And they were not going to be there very long. So they arrived pretty late, and instantly the entire family was fighting. They all tried to chalk it up to them all just being tired, but it was strange that just everyone was mad. So they grabbed some dinner and then immediately went to bed, and the follower recalls sleeping in the bed with their mom. Now, they were laying in bed trying to fall asleep, and they started hearing something bounce, hitting the wall, the ceiling. They just heard something bouncing. They tried to ignore it as best as they could, and eventually fell asleep and woke back up at around 4 in the morning to the same sound. At around 6, they get up out of bed and they go eat breakfast, and their father is talking about horrific nightmares that he had all night. So after breakfast, they all decide to go on a hike, and something's off about the hike. They just feel like something's always behind them. Everyone gets back, the parents go to take a nap, and the follower sits on the couch because they can't fall asleep. But eventually they do fall asleep, and they wake up to the same taps that they heard the night before. But something different happened this time. They felt a hand on their shoulder. They try to put that out of their mind. They go to bed, and they wake up in the middle of the night to their mom shaking them awake, saying, "We have to go. We have to leave now." So everyone hops up, they're packing, and while they're packing, everyone in the house is now hearing this knocking on the ceiling, on the walls, all over the house. They try to ignore it, they pack up, and they head out of there. They said something spooky is going on in these state parks, and no one's really talking about it. If you live in a town where a big tragedy happened, it's really not that unexpected to experience a bunch of paranormal activity. In this small town where this follower lived, in a mining town where a tragic mining incident occurred, it was pretty much expected that stuff was going to happen. I don't want to tell you too much about this town to protect their privacy, but there was an incident that occurred in the mine where something collapsed, a lot of people passed away, and they said the way that this town was set up is most houses had tunnels leading from their basement into the mines so that the miners could just walk that way whenever they got home, could undress in the basement, shower, get cleaned up, and all of that. And after the collapse, most of the tunnels were sealed off. So they move into this house, the follower and their family. The follower's like 2 or 3 at this time, and that door's sealed off. They said the basement door was in their living room, like kind of right behind their TV, and it led down to the basement, down to the door where the tunnels are that are sealed off. Well, one day the mom sees the follower at 2 years old just chatting away with someone, and they're like, "Who you talking to?" And the follower's like, "The miner. I'm talking to the miner that's standing right there." They would describe this man as tall, dirty, covered in soot, and he would always be wearing a black hat, and he would talk to the follower all the time. There was always a secret conversation being had until the last day. Apparently, the miner told the follower to come with them and tried to lead them down to the basement, and it ended with the follower screaming, crying, and running away, and they never interacted with the miner again. So a lot of us have seen the Hatman, right? But have we ever seen another spirit accompanying him? Well, this follower has, so let's get into the story. So in their bedroom, they stayed in the loft area of their bedroom, which means you had to go up a set of stairs or like a ladder type situation to get up there, and that was the only exit. And their bed was at the opposite side of this exit. So one night, they wake up at around 3 in the morning, not uncommon, but they do, and they want a glass of water. So they get up out of their bed and they start walking over to the exit, and they notice that there is something there. More specifically, there's 2 somethings there. There's the shadow of a tall man wearing a hat and carrying a briefcase, but he has someone beside of him. There's also the shadow of a little girl standing beside of him with a bow in her hair wearing a dress. It also looks like she's holding something, maybe a stuffed animal. And at this point, they assess the situation in their mind, and they're like, there's no way I can get past without, running into them, so I'm just gonna lay back down and pretend this isn't happening. Now, the Hatman was new, but the little girl had been seen by not only them, but everyone else in their household prior. Now, they didn't ask for any advice or anything on this situation, but to me, it kind of sounds like something in the house just took a liking to the Hatman or something and was just kind of following him around. Depending on who you ask, the Hatman's not a negative entity by any means. Many, including myself, think he's a protector, so it would make sense that a child spirit would, kind of follow him around if he's there. So while trying to film a cute video of their dog licking their sister's hand, they caught something on camera that they didn't want to catch. For reference, no one else in the home was awake or there that would have made this sound or this statement, and the dogs' names are Mike and Daisy. So let me just play that for you, and let's see if you can hear it. I mean, I definitely hear that. And no, if no one else was there to say that, if no one else was awake or in the home to say that, that is really concerning. That's so clear. news stories to share with you from the infamous Clown Motel in Nevada. Now, if you guys want a whole deep dive on this motel, I would love to do it. It's not in Appalachia, so I didn't know if you guys would be interested, but I have been obsessed with this place for years. I plan to visit, but essentially it is a haunted hotel that gets even more creepy because of its decor choice, and that is clowns. It is said to be very haunted, though. Outside of it being creepy, it is very haunted, and there's so many stories, and one of you guys sent me in one of your own stories from staying there, and I was so excited when I got that email. So this story took place back in 2022 when the follower and a few of their relatives were on a road trip, and they just had to stop at that Clown Motel, because if you were into spooky things and you were out there, you were stopping at it. Like, there's no way. So they get in, they get settled, and the follower ends up sharing a room with their dad, and their dad's like, hey, I need to run to the gas station. And the follower did not want to go. They were exhausted from the road trip and just wanted to relax. They said that they never turn on like the TVs in hotel rooms. They usually just watch stuff on their phone, and this day was no different. They got out their phone, they were watching YouTube laying on their bed, and they drifted off to sleep. They woke up to their dad being like, why do you have the TV on if you're not watching it? And so they were rubbing the sleep from their eyes, looking around, and sure enough, that TV was on, but it wasn't just on in a normal way, it was just playing static. No. Something else creepy that happened there. So like I said, the decor is made to be even more creepy, and there was a light overhead on the bathroom mirror that flickered on purpose, you know, just to give it that little extra whoof. So they and their dad were standing in front of the mirror and just making goofy, spooky faces in the mirror, right? Well, their dad randomly leaned in and was like, there's water on my neck. Water is dripping on my neck. And the follower was like, okay. So they felt their dad's neck, and it was bone dry. There was no water. But the dad was really adamant that he felt water drip on his neck. Y'all don't understand how badly I need to visit this place. I need to go. Now, working in a charity shop, a Goodwill, a thrift store, I feel like it goes without saying that you're going to get a haunted object or two. It seems as though that is exactly what's happening with a follower in the charity shop that they work at. So let's get all into this haunted doll. So in this shop, they said recently they were setting up in the middle front of the store a Halloween display, and they have acquired some pretty creepy dolls. And they put all of these dolls in a bin in front of that display with a level of how haunted they are attached to a tag on it, and it even tells about experiences that some of the employees have had with these dolls. There is one doll in particular that seems to have taken a specific interest with our follower. They said that they have to walk by this display often because it's in the front middle of the store, and they feel nauseous. Just something is off. They feel like they are being watched, and they know for a fact it's coming from this one specific doll. They tried to ignore these feelings at first because they weren't really feeling well the night before. They didn't get much sleep, so they were like, okay, I'm just not myself, and I'm trying to do all of this stuff at work. No wonder weird things are happening. But it just kept getting worse and worse. So now they're like, I don't really know what to do with the doll. It's for sale in the shop. I have to be around it, and it feels like it does not want me there. That is their main concern. This doll, it seems like it's pushing them out of the store. So I think a few things could be done about this. People love haunted objects, so maybe you could showcase this doll and be like, hey, something's really wrong and it might sell quicker. What I would probably do, what I most recommend, is cleansing the entire store and the doll itself. Maybe putting some protection crystals around it. You could go as far as to make a little box to put it in, make a little protection box, put the doll in that box, cleanse it, do banishments, and keep it in this box, and that might help it sell quicker as well. If this doll is so haunted, it's in a box. I don't vibe with haunted dolls. If you guys know me, you know that's not my thing. I have a Ouija board story to share with you today, and while it is a really good story and I want to tell it because it's really creepy, it also serves as a reminder of what to look out for if you decide to use a Ouija board and what could potentially put you in harm's way when using one, because these are not toys. They may be sold by a toy company, they may be in a toy aisle, but they are not toys, and you should really be safe using them. So let's get into what happened in North Carolina around the time that Hurricane Michael had hit. So this follower found themselves back home, trying to stay safe from the hurricane, and they were in a home with their little brother who had made a homemade Ouija board, and they were like, you know what, you do what you gotta do, I'm not touching it. And everyone in the family was like, come on, you know you want to play it. And eventually the follower gave in and put their hand on that planchette. The question started off innocent and relatively normal until the board decided to claim that it was their deceased grandfather. And the mom was like, okay, if you are, when did you pass away? And the board got it wrong, because that wasn't their grandfather, obviously. Not too long after this, the board began to go back and forth between the letters Z and the letter O repeatedly. And if you know anything about Ouija boards, or if you've been here before, you know that that is the name of a terrifying, terrible entity that just kind of flips around the boards and looks for ways out. So the follower immediately is just like, no, and grabs the planchette with all of their hands on it, forces it to goodbye, forces everyone at that board to say goodbye, and says, I am not playing anymore and none of us should. This is bad. So they go to bed, and at around 3 a.m, the follower is struck from underneath their bed. Literally, it was so low to the ground that no one could have been under there. They and their ex got up and checked all the closets, the hallways. No one was in the house that could have done that, but something reached up from underneath their bed and struck them. While they were looking, though, they did see the outline of something that was around 7 feet tall in their closet that they could not explain. They came to find that where they were struck left behind 3 scratches on their back. I am begging you guys, if you touch a Ouija board, and I'm not telling you not to, it is your decision. I just want you to be educated on it, to know what to look out for, how to be safe and respectful, and how to properly end sessions. Because if they hadn't properly ended that session, things would have went much worse. Z is no joke, and once you contact him once, he really hyper focuses on you, and you can't use a Ouija board anymore. So it's best to just know how to protect yourself from him, and if it's him, like, you can shut it down. Like, you just need to know when it's him. And I have a lot of videos on it because I have spoken with him many times, unfortunately. I have a lot of sessions that I called on video with him, and he's not fun. He's not good. It's never a good time. So, 10 out of 10, don't recommend that one. If you have never had a paranormal experience before in your life, you could start having them after visiting a haunted location. Also, I said could, not will. It's not always gonna happen, but it did happen to the person who wrote in this story. So let's get into it. They said before visiting this abandoned prison in Missouri, they hadn't had one paranormal experience, but boy did they after. After they left that prison a few nights later, they felt something crawl into bed with them between the gap in the wall and their bed, and they said it literally crawled in bed and just held them. They switched bedrooms, and a few nights later, the exact same thing happened in a different bedroom, along with the fact that they heard their friend's voice. When they heard their friend's voice, their dog, for an unrelated reason, was barking trying to get out of their room. That voice said, I got it, don't worry. So they got up, seemingly, this invisible voice got up, walked over to the door, opened it, let the dog out, and shut it back. Now, if I'm saying it's invisible, how do I know that that happened? Because the door opened and shut to let the dog out. They also said one night where they were showering, they looked up to find a head peeking at them through the shower curtain, and they immediately threw the shower curtain back, and there was no one in the room. So, even if you've never had an experience, if you visit paranormal locations, protect yourself, do cleansings after, because you never know what you could be opening yourself up to later on. Hearing the voices of loved ones call out to them was nothing really abnormal for this person, but there is one occurrence that sticks out more than the others that was a lot to deal with. So they're laying in bed and they hear their mom call out to them like, hey, can you hop up and feed the dog? This dog was fed at special times in the day, so it wasn't really abnormal. The follower did pick up that it was a little bit on the earlier side, but whatever. So they get up, go in, feed this dog, and then go back to their room. Well, around 10 minutes pass, and they hear their mom call out again, hey, could you go feed the dog? So they get up out of their bed, go into the dining room where their mom and dad are, and they're like, you just told me to feed the dog? I just fed the dog. And the mom was like, definitely did not. Like, good for you for doing it early, but I didn't say anything. This follower grew up in a house in Wisconsin surrounded by woods, and this particular experience with the dog food seemed to catapult them into a lot of other experiences. In fact, they're pretty convinced that something has been following them around, and it actually started that day with the dog food. Did it start because they acknowledged it? So they would experience things touching their back, seeing shadow people, and hearing things, but there is another specific occurrence that happened kind of recently that has left them puzzled and terrified. So they say they're sitting at their desk and they have their window open because it's like hot and stuffy and they want a fresh air. Well, while they're sitting there, they hear their mom's voice call out to them from outside. Their mom's not outside. So they just keep ignoring it until they hear it repeat again, but this time it is in their voice. And it gets a reaction out of it this time because they are so caught off guard that they just kind of look up and freeze. Then they hear what sounds like a non-human laugh as their window slams shut. And it's one of those windows that you have to shut yourself. Like, it cannot shut like that. And then when that happened, they would hear hello right in their ear. But imagine innocently going to a friend's house for a sleepover and having your most terrifying paranormal experience there. Let's get into it. So this happened when this person was around the age of 14, and they said it was not uncommon for them to go to a sleepover, so this night started out like any other. They said they recall it being around nighttime, and they're sitting on the edge of their friend's dimly lit porch when something happens. They start talking, as two teenagers would do, and paranormal topics start to come up. And before you know it, the paranormal topic of things in the woods come up, right as they're sitting on the edge of a dimly lit porch right on the outskirts of some woods. It's like the worst time to do it. For no reason whatsoever, the follower that wrote in this story begins sobbing. Just mid-conversation, said they were laughing, cutting up one minute, and they are just sobbing, fully despair the next, for no reason whatsoever. And then before they know it, they feel themselves being physically dragged into the house by their friend. They probably didn't even know it was their friend until they looked up. But that friend gets them inside, slams the door shut, slams the curtain shut, and is just trying to hide. So the follower's like, why are you doing that? I was just crying. I don't think it warranted all of this. And the friend goes on to say, there was something very tall and lanky standing at the edge of the woods staring at us. So they run upstairs, go to the closet after shutting every window, every curtain, every blind in that house, go into that friend's closet and sleep there all night, or what they thought. The follower actually wakes up in the bed. They don't remember getting out of that closet, but they wake up in the bed and the curtains are open in that room's window, and no one in the house took responsibility for doing that. There might be a walker in Moonlight Valley Ranch in Nevada. So let's get into one of our followers' personal encounters. Well, their family's personal encounters. So one night this follower's dad, their aunt, and a few other people went out searching this area after dark, with permission of course. And during this exploration, everything went silent at one point. Even though they weren't near the Appalachian Mountains, you pretty much know, even if you don't, that if everything goes silent outside, you do not need to be in that area. And that's exactly what happened in all their brains. They started heading back to the car. They didn't get more than a few feet before something came charging at them over the hill. Because this area was, in a little valley, so they have hills on each side. Something is charging down that hill at them. This thing did not look normal. Kind of looked like a raccoon in some light, kind of looked human, kind of looked like something else. It was all over the place in what it looked like. But they see this thing charging at them, and thankfully someone in the group is able to slip to the car very quickly and grab out a sword. Now this sword was very important to the follower's dad. He is and was a Wiccan, and he firmly believes that this sword that he carried around everywhere saved all of their butts that night. So this person gets the sword, throws it to the father, and the father starts trying to fight this thing off. They all watch in horror as this thing shifts from having a raccoon head and a human body to a human body and a raccoon head. It's just literally shifting right in front of their eyes. Thankfully, that sword was enough to keep them all safe that night, and I would never leave the house without it again. I would never go back there again, but also never leave the house without that sword again. Have you ever been chased by the pale white dog that isn't exactly a dog in Utah? Well, one of you guys for sure did, so let's talk about that story. So this occurred one night at around 10 p.m. when they were driving home from their sisters, and they said they were a little tired, but nothing to hinder their driving, right? So they're driving down the road, they enter this roundabout, and they see something approaching. Kind of fast. They said they didn't get the best look at it because of how fast it was moving, but they noticed that it was pale white, kind of looked like a dog, but it was bald and it was running very fast on all fours. They said they could already tell that it wasn't a dog, but that became very apparent when it disappeared right in front of them. Gone. I have heard so many stories of creatures like this just popping up and then disappearing randomly. I've heard about them in all kinds of states, including Utah, so I'm I'm just curious if anyone else out there has experienced this as well. I am here to ruin any feeling of safety you have if you live in an apartment a few floors up, if you live on the second story of a house. That does not mean that you are completely safe. Let's get into it. So the person that sent in this story started off by telling me that their boyfriend really liked to leave windows open. It just gets stuffy and he likes to let the air move around. And she was like, you know, we live on like the third floor. I never thought anything of it. So I was like, you have at it. You have fun. Well, at around 9 p.m. on the night when this is happening, that's exactly what was going on. The window was open. They were on the phone with their friend, just chatting away. Happened to look over. They were in their kitchen. Look over at their bathroom because something was moving, and they see what looks like a child kind of moving around sporadically in that bathroom. They catch eyes. This child smiles, and ain't nothing natural about this smile. They immediately said, "You need to leave. I don't know what your business is in this bathroom, but you got to get out." And that actually did work for a second. They got out, but they went out to the window on the balcony, and they just hear it talking from outside. It is name calling, some really inappropriate names if you're catching my drift, just doing all kinds of stuff. So the follower gets out their phone, snaps a picture of that window, and you can see handprints. I'll insert that right now. But anyways, after this, they begged their boyfriend. They were like, you need to leave that window closed because I fear something was like, if a window's open, then I'm welcome, and came inside. And he did that for a while until one day when he didn't. They had came home, were relaxing, noticed that something felt off, heard a shrill whistle come from outside. They were like, I know that window ain't open. I know he didn't leave that window open. He left the window open. Close your windows, people, please. One night while lying in bed scrolling through TikTok, and more specifically my videos, something really creepy happened to a follower, so let's get into it. So they said it was around 9 p.m. They were lying in bed waiting for their husband to get home because he gets home really late, and they had their door kind of cracked open just in case one of their kids needed something. Well, they're lying in bed scrolling, and they hear their husband call them from the kitchen, and they start to get up. Thank goodness, look at their phone to check the time. See that it is 3 hours before he's supposed to be home, and they don't respond. And then the husband calls again, but more aggressive this time. And all while this is happening, their dog that is lying at the foot of their bed is staring at this slightly open door, growling. So they laid there, pretended they heard and saw nothing until their husband got home and then went back to normal. And that would not be the last time that happened. A few days later, they are now in the living room watching a movie. It's like an hour later, but they're still waiting for their husband to come home. Well, they hear a voice from the hallway behind them where their kids' rooms are, and it sounds like their eldest child calling for them. And they say, Mom, come here. The mom responds and says, no, you come in here. Nothing. Again, the voice of the eldest child, more aggressive this time. Mom, come here. So they freeze in their chair as they hear this sound, this voice, what sounds like their child, get closer and closer and closer until it is right behind them. They don't move a muscle until their husband gets home hours later. So the next morning, when all of their kids get up to get ready for the day, they ask their oldest child if they happen to do that, and they said, Mom actually slept through the night last night. I definitely didn't call you. I didn't leave my room. Please put up protections when you watch these videos, guys. It all started with seeing a very tall, very lanky shadow figure outside of the window consistently. Even as this person was writing in the story to me, they said as they were typing, they would look up outside of their window and it was standing there staring at them as they were writing. They said this thing, as far as they know, has never entered their home, but it's always just outside, watching, studying, lurking, stalking. They noticed that activity really amped up after they left their friend's house, so let's talk about what happened there. They said their friend lives in a wooded, mountainous area, and they were outside one day, and they said some names out loud that they feel like they shouldn't have said. And they said after that, weird things started happening. Now, the shadowy figure with green eyes just seems to follow them wherever they go. It doesn't get too close, it doesn't hurt them, but it just stays there watching. The final experience they had that stuck out to them occurred one night while they were with their brother night fishing in a wooded area. They saw what looked like a white skull in the trees, and then they started hearing voices around them that their brother was not hearing. They said they hear voices all the time that sound like their loved ones calling for them when it's not their loved ones calling for them. Y'all, I'm begging you, if you can avoid saying names, especially outside, please do not say the names. Please avoid it at all costs. Get cozy and turn a light on, because not only do I have a scary story to read for you guys, it comes with a creepy picture. So let's get into it. Go turn on the light. I'll wait. A little over a year ago, my friends and I went to the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas for my birthday. My dad had dropped us all off and we were taking pictures in a mirror that was in the hallway next to our room. Well, later when we left that room, we all made sure that it was closed completely. All 5 of us tugged on it as hard as we could, and this will be important for later. When we were going downstairs, 2 of my friends looked into the reflection of a window and saw a shadow figure in a top hat behind us. They didn't want to say anything until later. We went back to our room and the door was cracked open. That night we were telling scary stories, and whenever we would talk, we would hear a tapping sound, but when we stopped talking, it would stop, and it was happening over and over again. We set a timer for random amounts of time to stop talking, and every time that we would start talking, the tapping would start, so we just went to bed. When we woke up, we looked at the pictures we took the day before to see if we'd caught anything, and in one of the mirror pictures, there's 2 faces behind me. I know I'm short, but they were significantly taller than me. My friends and I were the only ones in that hallway at the time, and I'm the one in the pink hoodie. I'll show the original picture and then the zoomed in one. The black figure in the photo I'm not surprised to see because it looked like the same entity that I will see sometimes, but I have no idea what the white figure was. And here's that picture. So this family moves to a piece of land that they had purchased in the Appalachian Mountains. And to their knowledge, this piece of land had never been built on, and they weren't going to start that either. So they bought a trailer and put it right on that land. That did not stop things from feeling disrespected on that land. And not too long after they moved in, they would start to hear tapping on their walls, their windows, their doors, just a constant tapping. Their dog would also randomly start barking, and that was pretty abnormal for this dog. And they said just overall, it was a really unwelcomed feeling. So one night, things get really bad. They let their dogs out to do their business like they normally do, and their dog is hyper fixated on an area of the woods. They look over to see what the heck their dog is losing its marbles about, and they see a human-like figure standing just at the edge of the trees. So they quickly call their dogs back in and go inside, and they're like, okay, well, that's enough for me tonight. They were completely unable to sleep that night, and since then, things have actually gotten terribly worse. They will see things in the reflections of anything with a reflective surface, really, but especially mirrors. They started to do some research on some tips and tricks that they could use in these mountains to keep themselves safe because things were getting so out of hand. They said, to make matters worse, one night their cat was accidentally let outside. When they lived in the other place, this cat would actually, scurry out and just wander around and be really hard to get back inside. But when it was let out here, it was scratching and clawing at the door almost immediately to be let back inside. And whenever it got back inside, it would stand perched at the window staring at the woods. Stuff is off in these mountains, and sometimes those animals will be the first to let you know.